Welcome to Passion, a show all about love, sex, and relationships. I'm Dr. Laurie Bettito. Tonight, our regular monthly feature that we call Dating Dilemmas. Every month, Frank Kermit joins us. He is an author and now best-selling author on Lulu, which is great for you. He's written many books on the subject of dating, and tonight, especially something that he has researched and written about, and that is... we're going to try to find out what the needs are of the opposite sex. And I want to focus on the needs of women. Why? Because I get questions from men all the time. I don't understand women. I just don't get it. I do this, I do that. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know what they need. And I know, maybe it's not all women, but I know that there are some general things that men can learn about the needs of women. So Frank wrote a book called Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to satisfying the emotional needs of women, and also The Eye of the Seductress, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. So we can talk about either of those topics, but I do want to focus on women because I want to answer those questions for our male listeners. Frank, welcome back.
It's great to be here, Dr. Laurie. I'm really happy to be back.
Well, we're always glad to have you on for sure. So I want to hear from some of our listeners in terms of your own struggles to understand the opposite sex. Do you have trouble? In what areas are you the most confused? What is it that remains a mystery to you? Do you find the opposite sex predictable? Maybe because you do understand them, or maybe you don't understand them and you're getting frustrated. So give us a call tonight at 514-790-0991. You can text your message at 514-800, Star Talk, star 8255 on your Bell Mobility cell phone. So I know people are wondering, what's the biggest difference between men and women? And I don't know if I want to just talk about gender differences, but I think we do have to talk in terms of our needs are different. I think that is a reality. And people have to, we have to understand each other's language because it's human nature to assume that if I need something, well, you need something. If I'm thirsty, you must be thirsty. Well, but it doesn't work like that, does it?
Exactly. In many cases, when you're dealing with people who don't understand the opposite sex, usually there's an underlying belief that, well, we're just the same. Our bodies are different, but everybody needs the same things. Well, when you're talking about survival, physical needs, food, shelter, clothing, transportation, yes, in that regard, we're all equal.
Right.
We have equal rights under the law. We should have equal rights to protection under the law. But men and women are not equal because we're not the same. We're different. We have equal rights, but we are different. And when I get somebody who says, I don't understand men or I don't understand women, usually it turns out that they have an assumption that, well, if I would react a certain way in a situation, I expect my partner to react that way.
Right.
And we will not, because we have different emotional motivations.
We also have different brains sometimes. Just the way we process information might be different. And I hear that in couples who are struggling, let's say in couples therapy, when, so often you'll get, someone will say something, the other person, well, the way I would do it, and it's not about I or the way you would do it, or just because you would do it that way, it makes it the right way. So, some of that is trying to move away from that kind of thinking and trying to really listen. And part of that, it is the communication, is to be able to really listen to what those needs are and what the other person is saying, rather than have this combat between, well, you do it this way, well, I do it this way, who's going to win? It becomes a tug of war. And most relationships, I have to say, go through this power struggle. Lots of relationships go through this power struggle because they don't understand it. Let's hear from Joe. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Ooh, a female Joe. How are you?
Yes. I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Well, again, just along the same lines that you were just speaking of, when it comes to communication in my relationship, I think the biggest issue is when it's really conflict resolution. I'm the type of person that, I'm very emotional and sensitive, and I feel when there's a problem, I need to deal with it right then and there.
You need to talk it out.
I need to talk it out. I need to lay it all on the table and that's how I feel I get over things.
Right.
Whereas my boyfriend is the opposite, and he really is like, give me time, give me my space so to cool down. And I usually do, but in the meantime, I just get even more and more
right. You're seething and boiling and waiting for that to happen. And you know, one of the mistakes people make is just not understanding that it's not that he doesn't want to deal with it. It's that right now, in the heat of the moment, he needs time to process, and he needs just time to cool off. And what women don't get, often what they'll do is they'll follow their partner. He's trying to get away to cool off, and you're following him right to the bathroom. No, you're going to talk about it right now. And of course that, leads to even more conflict.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think that's pretty common though there, Joe.
But how do I just have to suck it up? Or because I feel like sometimes I'm the one doing all the accommodating. And at the end, to kind of get everything back to normal, I end up usually apologizing, even though I feel like it should be the other way around. And so, I don't know.
But if you were to give him the time to process it and come back, I think the best way is to say to you, if he could say to you, listen, yes, I know you want to talk about this. I just need a little bit of time. How about we get back to this in an hour? If he was to say that to you, you could hold off an hour.
Yeah.
Because then you could have a more calm discussion and be heard more. Because in that heat of the moment, when you're spilling it all out, he may not hear you because you haven't given him that time. So I guess I see your point, like whose needs trump whose, but if you really want good communication, we do have to respect each other's limitations sometimes, or limits, or the way that we could do it. Frank, do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I could add is that when a guy needs his quiet time, which is emotional need number 2 of men, we need our quiet time. Here's what's happening. There's a lot of emotions going on inside us. We need to process those emotions, because if we act on the emotion in the moment, we're liable to do things that we're all going to regret later on. We need to process those so we understand exactly not just what we're feeling, but why we're feeling it. Number 2, when a woman does continue to follow a man and pester a man, the man does not interpret this as you value the relationship. A man will feel attacked.
Wow.
This is why you end up having to apologize. Because you continue to say, no, look, I value our relationship so much, we need to talk about this now. But that's not the way a guy is interpreting it. What he's interpreting is, wow, you're attacking me right now. You're trying to make this my fault, and it's not my fault, and I'm getting even more angry at the accusation. Now we're away from what the original issue was that brought on this conflict that needed to be resolved. We're now into a sense where he's now getting defensive, not because of what the original thing was, but because he's feeling so attacked in the moment. He's saying, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to be attacked.
And then you apologize for attacking him, you see?
That's really something I never considered. It's quite eye-opening.
Good. Well, take that lesson and apply it and see what happens. I'm sure you'll see a difference.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for your call. Go ahead.
One more thing I want to add here, Joe, if you're still listening.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to talk to a man, you want to get him on your side, because guys think in terms of ally versus enemy. That's how we decipher our emotional needs.
Okay.
Tell him, look, I'm not attacking you. I need your help in order to resolve this. That makes him an ally in the resolution of the conflict. Because as long as you approach him as an ally, he says, wow, she's on my side, so she's not attacking me if she's on my side.
Right. You work as a team, not against each other. We're working on this together. I'm not against you, I'm with you. So that's the message that gets through.
Oh, I feel really good about that.
Okay, good. I'm glad,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. Bye-bye now. Bye. 514-790-0991. Dating dilemmas tonight. We're trying to decipher male-female differences and trying to understand each other, basically, and better our communication and increase the odds in successful dating. So you're listening to Dating Dilemmas tonight on Passion on CJAD.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, do you want the man in your life to understand you on your level? Do you want your man to be able to listen to and address all of your emotional needs? Show him how much you really want your relationship to be the best it can be. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test makes a perfect gift. The book, written by a man, for men, is endorsed by every woman that reads it. This book is a guide for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
Dating dilemmas tonight on Passion. What do women need, want, and why do guys have a hard time understanding women? And maybe the opposite, too. Do women have a hard time understanding men and their needs? Of course they do, and that's where a lot of our problems lie. Joining me tonight, as he does every month, is Frank Kermit of Frank Talks. He is the author of Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to satisfying the emotional needs of women, and The Eye of the Seductress, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men, both available on Frank's website. Right, Frank? They're available on your website, franktalks.com. You'll also find a link to that on the Passion webpage as well. Hi, Matt. Welcome to Passion.
Hi, Dr. Laurie.
How are you?
Fine. Well, it's an interesting topic. As you know, I'm openly gay, so I see female-male relationships in a very different way.
Yes.
And I think I see it in a very positive way. I believe, and I'm being sexist when I say this, but I believe a gay man or a lesbian oddly really understand the opposite sex.
Right.
And because that sex for sex and everything is not there. But I had to call because what I don't understand, I'm I'm an educator myself, and I did APSS. I thrive on conflict resolution, but I'm frustrated with two women that are very close to me, one being my mother, and that's been going on for years, mother-son thing.
Right.
But I don't understand. My view is women just don't want to settle that argument. It always becomes a winner-loser kind of thing, and they carry on and on and on. Like you said, they follow you around. I go to my bedroom or I go to the shopping center. I need time now, please. Could you give me a chance? Why do you need to breathe? What's going on? I said, well, I have to breathe. I have to think this out. I have to process.
Right.
And by the time I finish, I carry it for 4, 5, 6 hours after. And the women are, after 40 or 30 minutes, they forgot about it. Or it's in the back of their mind. And I'm going around for 5 or 6 hours after. I'm feeling really frustrated, really down. And I'm wondering, how can I combat that feeling, and why is it that women necessarily need to really take it to the end of the end?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Frank, you studied men and women relationships. Tell me about this.
All right. Well, first of all, Matt, I'm really glad you called because a lot of where I want to go in the future of my research is in the area of gay, lesbian, and transgendered populations and their emotional needs. So this is a really, really interesting topic for me. In terms of why the women in your life are doing that. Emotional need number 2 of women is for them to experience an emotional range. What we would call as guys, we would say, oh, that's just drama. All right? Why do women respond to lots of drama in their lives? Now, let's be fair. Not all women are like this. Right. Okay? There are some women who are just like men in this fashion where they really hate the drama. Those women generally don't get along with other women. But when you're dealing with a woman who really gets off on the drama, it's because that is the way she feels alive.
Isn't it tiring after a while, though? Isn't it?
Ask the guys. Oh, yeah.
Most guys are going to say it's tiring, but I got to tell you, there are some men who also respond to drama. The difference between men and women is our ability to process emotions. Now, this is something I've done through my research and while I was dating and different things that I've read. A guy will have an emotion. He may have an emotion about that emotion, and he may finally have an emotion about that emotion, but it stops. It doesn't go any deeper. We need the time to process all this. Whereas a woman will have an emotion about an emotion about an emotion about an emotion about an emotion, and it could go on for 3 or 4 levels, maybe more. She doesn't short circuit the way a guy would. Because the more different emotions that are going on inside her, the more she feels alive in the moment. Any emotional need, even if it's a healthy emotional need, when taken to an extreme, can become dysfunctional.
Thanks, Doctor, and good luck with your studies in the gay world, because I believe and just the type of person that I am, I believe the dynamics are very...
Yeah. Matt, you know what? You should contact Frank. I think he could learn a little bit from you because you've been in the social work field and you've worked in this area. You should actually get in touch. We should connect you guys.
Fantastic.
All right, Matt, thanks for calling.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. 514-790-0991, Star Talk, star 8255 on your Bell Mobility cell phone, 1-800-491-CJD. I don't think much has actually been written exactly about that, right? The emotional needs in gay relationships. And
very little. I hope to be one of the first to put something out there.
Because people ask me that question, like, okay, so now what do you get 2 women together, 2 men together, and especially with sexuality and all the other, needs around.
With the homosexual couples that I've talked to and that I've worked with, there's this underlying belief that, well, since we're the same gender, this is going to work out even better and we understand each other. But those type of assumptions don't always work out in the end. For example, 2 women who are in a lesbian relationship will each take a sexual aggressiveness that they themselves would like, figuring that all women would respond to this type of sexual aggressiveness. Mm-hmm. When you might have a woman who needs a very, very gentle touch, and you might have a woman who wants much more aggression in the bedroom. But neither one is going to tell the other, well, I really like it a different way, because they don't want to hurt each other's feelings. So they may not be able to connect that way. So what we're looking at here, when you're looking at emotional needs, look for emotional needs that are compatible. And that is key in any relationship, whether it's a heterosexual relationship or a gay relationship or anything within the pansexual range.
That makes sense.
You want to find someone who has complementary emotional needs, those that are very similar in certain respects, and those that will be complementary.
Coming up, we'll talk about what, we'll put words to what those emotional needs are for both men and women. You're listening to Dating Dilemmas on Passion, right here on CJAD 800.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by The Eye of the Seductress, Volume 1, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. This book is designed to teach women how to seduce men into making a commitment. By learning about the emotional needs of men, a woman will learn what makes even the most notorious players, pimps, and high-value men and quality male leaders commit to one particular woman. From the desk of Frank B. Kermit, the seduction relationship expert, this book is also a great resource for men to learn how to judge the value of a woman to know if she is worthy of everything he has to offer. The Eye of the Seductress. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Passion and Dating Dilemmas. Frank Kermit is here of franktalks.com. He's the author of Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to satisfying the emotional needs of women, and The Eye of the Seductress, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men, both available at franktalks.com and soon on Amazon.
Very soon.
Yay. All right, so you came up with a theory. I want to know how you got to writing about all of this, theorizing about all of this, because your theories do make perfect sense to me. And, how did you put this down on paper?
All right, well, let's start off with my history. I've talked about this before. Got stood up at my prom. Ex-fiance left me for my best friend.
Right, yeah, all your sob stories of your own history. But that's your personal stuff. And then?
Okay, I got to a point where I said, figure out my love life, learn to understand love to the point where it's predictable. I don't want to rely on luck. I want it to be predictable.
Okay.
And that's where it started. And at that point, I refused to read anything academic on the subject of relationships. I didn't want to read about how relationships are supposed to be. I wanted to learn, this is the way relationships are, and this is what you have to do to make it work.
Okay.
And I started to do everything from talk to couples who had been together for, 50 years, and, well, what made it work? The fact is, most people can't articulate when something works.
It is hard to articulate, yeah. You know the negative. The negatives are easy to come up with. The positives are the hard things sometimes.
And then you have to realize that what people respond to is not necessarily something they're going to admit to. So the person might say, well, I really hate it when he just comes in and he does his thing and he's so stubborn. But it's that element of stubbornness that gets interpreted by her as a man being assertive, and she responds to it. So this became a matter of, okay, I'm just going to talk to a whole bunch of people who are really good with women, people who are really bad with women. And whatever the guys who were bad with women said, I knew, don't do that.
Don't do. And then you put it all on paper. Wow.
I put it all on paper. This is a journal that I kept for many years. And it was just a matter of, this person told me to do something, I went out and did it. And that's
awesome.
How I know.
We'll continue to talk about the emotional needs of men and women after this.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, do you want the man in your life to understand you on your level? Do you want your man to be able to listen to you and address all of your emotional needs? Show him how much you really want your relationship to be the best it can be. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test makes the perfect gift. The book, written by a man, for men, is endorsed by every woman that reads it. This book is a guide for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
Welcome to the second half of Passion. Tonight, Dating Dilemmas once a month. Frank Kermit joins us at franktalks.com. We are talking about the emotional needs of both men and women, because we often get questions about, I don't understand men, I don't get it, why are we so different, why is our communication so difficult, and why, and why, and we get this a lot. Frank actually wrote 2 books about the subject. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to satisfying the emotional needs of women. I'm going to ask you why Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test. And The Seductress, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. So you came up after talking to many couples, successful ones, unsuccessful ones, men, women, testing out your own theories on yourself. You came up with a theory of what the needs of women are, the needs of men. Tell me about those.
Okay, let's start off with the emotional needs of women. In experimenting, going out on dates, I made the goal the following. If I ended up having sex with a woman, I've addressed some sort of an emotional need. But if I'm going on a date and at some point she says, let's just be friends, I don't really feel that way about you, you're kind of like my brother, I don't want to ruin our friendship, etc., etc., then I have failed. So sex became...
But what about just simple attraction? Why can't it just be about simple attraction?
I don't understand your question. What do you mean simple attraction? Like 2 people, you mean 2 people just find themselves attracted to each other and they'll go for it?
Yeah, well, what if they find other things are okay, but the attraction isn't there?
Because if you address a person's emotional needs, the result is that they will feel attraction.
Okay, so you manipulate the situation so that attraction is there in a way.
Oh, don't talk about it like that.
Okay, that's the old seduction days. Okay. Tell me about the need.
Okay, let's start off with emotional need number 1 of women. And it's not because it's the most important emotional need, but it's the best way to teach it to men.
Okay.
Emotional need number 1 of women, protect her reputation.
Okay.
Because depending on the woman, now some women really don't care about their reputation. They don't care who knows what. In fact, some women will boast about things in their past that, most people might get turned off by, but that's what she gets off on.
Okay.
However, if a man behaves in a manner that no matter where he is, whether he's with his friends, her friends, family, or whatnot, he will protect the reputation of the women that he has been involved with. This addresses an emotional need. She ends up feeling special. Why? Because she doesn't end up feeling like his mother. The underlying principle is that a woman can only play one of 2 roles in any man's life.
As his mother or as his whore? Isn't the reputation more about protecting her reputation?
Protecting her reputation in all cases. You never speak badly about the person that you're involved with.
Of course not.
If you have anything to say about that person, it should be to that person.
Right.
Now, a woman will only play one of 2 roles in any man's life. She either will feel like his mother or she will feel like his lover.
If she feels like his mother, she ain't going to be his lover. I
Exactly.
can tell you that much.
Now, this is where men and women are different, because a man sees it as ally versus enemy. Is she my ally or is she my enemy? If she is behaving like his mother, she's getting turned off by him. She doesn't want to be intimate with him.
I'm sure he can't be very much turned on by somebody who treats him like a child.
Well, some men are. Because remember, men and women are different. So a man will look at the situation and say, okay, she's behaving sort of like my mother. She's doing things for me. She's treating me like a child.
Oh, she's my ally.
She's my ally, and I'm a man. I'll have the desire to have sex is ever constant. So she's my ally. I'm willing to have sex with her.
Okay.
In some cases, men are willing to have sex with their enemies too, which explains a lot of the situations that men find themselves in.
Right.
So this is one of the main ways that men and women are different. A woman will not have sex with a man if she feels mothering towards him.
Right. It'll be very hard for her to feel attraction to somebody
Exactly.
she feels mothering to.
This is the plight of nice guys. Because the nice guy says, wow, she's being so nice to me. She's being polite to me. She's being like my mother. She's looking after me. I want to date her. Because the instinct for sex is always there for a guy. Mm-hmm. He has no problem with the concept, I can have sex with my female friends. A woman, however, doesn't have any sexual urge to sleep with her male friends. They're male friends because at some point she feels more motherly to them than she does feeling like a lover to them.
Right, so they're friends, not lovers, for a reason.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the needs that you talk about is cater to the little girl in her. What's that about?
I've often found, and this is so key sometimes to really get at the heart of what a woman is about. In what I teach men is that inside every adult woman, there is a little girl who's looking to be catered to, who's looking to receive love and warmth and attention, and who just wants to feel safe.
Yeah, that feeling of safety really is important. I have that discussion a lot with couples.
So what happens is that, let's say you're on a date and you're getting along really well. Do something for her as if she were a little kid. Watch what happens. Look at the way her eyes will light up.
I'm going to share a little story with you because on the very first date with my husband, I had a headache and I was just kind of rubbing my head and whatever. He excused himself to go to the bathroom. We were sitting in a restaurant. He comes back with aspirin that he got from a machine, and handed him, and that said so much to me. Mm-hmm. I guess that he was addressing that need. He was catering to being taking care of that, taking care of me.
He was being a strong father figure. I'll be responsible for what's going to happen. I'm going to take care of you right now. You're in pain. I see that. I'm not going to make you feel bad or try to make you responsible and say, well, you really should go get your own aspirin and so on. I'm not going to make you the adult in that case. I'm going to cater to the little girl in you. And in that moment, that's what
happened. It was like, oh my God, that was so sweet.
When a woman goes, oh, you've got her. You've addressed emotional need number 3, cater to a girl.
I'm going to ask my husband if he did that on purpose, if he actually knew that whole theory.
You know what? The idea is that he got you. It worked. It worked. And this is what I base it on. I didn't base it on what was politically correct. As you know very well, that a lot of the stuff that I write is not politically correct. Yeah. But it works. Right. And it works for these reasons, because it's not about what people say they like. It's about what people respond to, whether you're a man or a woman.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. 514-790-0991. Would love to hear some of your thoughts tonight. Do you struggle to understand the opposite sex? Where are some of the issues where you find you're having difficulty understanding, like some things that keep coming up maybe in your relationship and that there are conflicts about? Maybe we can help you solve that mystery a little bit. Frank Kermit joins me. He is Frank Talks. He's an author. FrankTalks.com is his website. The book's Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test. Why a test?
It's the best way to teach a guy to understand women.
Is to tell them that everything out of her mouth is a test?
If he assumes that everything out of her mouth is a test, he's on guard. He's ready. It trains his brain to look for the emotional needs behind her words and actions.
Interesting.
So when you're talking to a guy, you're dealing with a guy who is taught from the time he's born, from the time he's a little kid, you have to achieve, you have to set goals, you have to make something of yourself, you have to make something happen. He's going to be issued all kinds of challenges to prove himself.
Right.
So when I teach guys, everything out of her mouth is a test. It puts their brain into, okay, what's the emotional need behind everything she's saying and doing?
So it makes them think rather than just act and say without thinking.
It gives him that process. Now, is he going to be consciously thinking about this for the rest of his life? No, because under my system, give me 6 months with him. 6 months. It'll be so automatic. He's no longer thinking, oh, that was emotional need number 4 that she was expressing when she said that. He will automatically respond in the right appropriate way, just because he's always seen the new interactions with women through a new filter.
Hey, you want to get 6 months with Frank? Call him. franktalks.com. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test. A Man's Guide to Satisfying the Emotional Needs of Women is the book. You're listening to Passion on CJAD 800.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by The Eye of the Seductress, Volume 1, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. This book is designed to teach women how to seduce men into making a commitment. By learning about the emotional needs of men, a woman will learn what makes even the most notorious players, pimps, and high-value men and quality male leaders commit to one particular woman. From the desk of Frank B. Kermit, the seduction relationship expert, this book is also a great resource for men to learn how to judge the value of a woman to know if she is worthy of everything he has to offer. The Eye of the Seductress. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.
Dating Dilemmas, once a month. Frank Kermit joins us at franktalks.com. You know, he does offer coaching to men, so you could get in touch with him, Frank at franktalks.com. He wrote the book, Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, A Man's Guide to Satisfying the Emotional Needs of Women. Also a book for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. So this is exactly what we're talking about, is trying to understand, and according to Frank's theory, that if you understand the emotional needs of each gender, then communication is better. Success, you have more success in your relationships, and more success in dating as well, right? I mean,
Exactly.
you teach that right off the bat.
Exactly. You know, one of the things that's always brought up to me is the fact that I am not a stereotypical, great-looking guy. However, you give me a half hour in a conversation with a woman, and I'll get her intrigued. And it's just based on my ability to communicate with her.
You're just charming. You know it.
I wouldn't say I'm charming. Amazing human being, yes. Charming, that might be pushing it.
All right, so what are some of the other emotional needs of women that we're looking at? We talked about the little girl in her, catering to that, her reputation. Do a lot of women have a fear of abandonment? Because I see that's on your list, too, of emotional needs of women.
Fear of abandonment can be huge for some women.
For some men, too, though.
Yes, except that for men, it has a very different effect.
Okay.
When a man fears abandonment, it means he can't stand on his own. He comes across as creepy, as weak,
needy?
As clingy and needy.
Okay.
So when a guy says, "Please don't leave me," now he might be trying to express, "You're so important to me, please don't go."
Right.
However, him having a fear of abandonment means that he'll never be trusted to lead, because leaders cannot ever fear abandonment. And if he's expected to be assertive in any relationship, he can't fear abandonment. The same way that a man doesn't have the luxury of fearing rejection. You know what happens when a guy fears rejection?
He doesn't do anything.
He doesn't do anything, and he could end up a 40-year-old virgin.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of adult-aged virgins. Why? That fear of rejection.
You wrote a book on that too, didn't you?
Yes, I did. The Adult Male Virgin Handbook, also at franktalks.com. For a woman, fear of abandonment, I think, at least in terms of my understanding of it, it's not just a biological need where she might end up having a kid and then get stuck alone and abandoned.
Right.
There's the idea that she has a biological clock. And this is one of the biggest differences between men and women. When I explain this to men, it's almost like the light bulb just goes on. A man doesn't think in terms of a biological clock because
Well, he can do it anytime.
he can start a family at the age of 45 if he wants to.
55, 65, 75 if he wants to.
He can waste his life playing video games and with his little Star Wars figures in the basement for years and then decide
Great.
one day, okay, I'm going to spend the next 2 years working on myself and get married, and he could be well into his late 40s and 50s. He can still start a family.
Right.
Women don't have that option.
No.
In fact, the older she gets before she has her first child, the higher the risks are, not only to her, but also to her children.
Well, of course. We know that the chances of pregnancies after 45 are under 10%, under 5% even.
And we're also talking about the health of the child.
And the health of the, right.
So there's
right.
more risks there.
Sure.
When my wife and I were pregnant, and we were subject to a lot more tests because we were in our mid-30s when we were having our first child. So this is a very real thing. And women are very, very much, they have this on the mind.
Right.
You know, every month they get a reminder that time is ticking away, and they have a limited amount of time.
And limited amount of eggs.
So their resources are constantly going down. So they're thinking in terms of, wow, I'm running out of time. So are you the one? Are you not the one? Should I take the chance? Should I not take the chance? What if I make a mistake and you leave? And I'm going to end up being single with a kid. I'm going to be alone. And it's going to be even harder for me to attract another life partner. A guy doesn't have this on his mind. So he doesn't understand why a girl is going to make such a big deal about things when they're dating. So when I explain...
Or pressuring him, you mean, or trying to find out where it's at or where...
Exactly. Because she's thinking, look, I got a limited amount of time here. If I want to have kids while I'm young enough and healthy enough, maybe I want to have 3 or 4 kids. I don't have time to waste.
Right.
So step up, guy.
Right.
And he's thinking, I don't get it. Why is she putting this pressure on me? Can't we just enjoy what we have right now?
Right. It's good now. Why change it?
Exactly.
Right.
When I explain to guys, listen, she has a biological clock. And what you're doing, wasting her time, is unethical. Because
But he may not be thinking he's wasting time because he's probably thinking, well, maybe it'll go somewhere, maybe it won't. I'm just waiting.
He has the luxury of waiting.
Right.
He has the luxury of taking his time. She doesn't.
Right.
That's one of the biggest differences between men and women. And when a guy finally understands, oh my, she has a biological clock, it starts getting him into the process of what is the ethical thing to do. And the ethical thing to do is that even if I want to date her, if I don't plan to marry this girl, if I don't plan to have kids with her, she has to be free to find her soulmate, whoever that may
Obviously,
be.
that doesn't happen in the first date or the second date, but at least not years into the relationship.
I find it very unethical when a guy will string a girl along after 2 or 3 years and he's already got in his head, I still don't know what I want to do with her. You know, I don't know if I want to marry or not. You know what? Set her free.
Right.
Okay, set her free. She deserves the chance to find her soulmate and to build a future and a family.
Right.
Because once she loses that opportunity, it doesn't come back for her.
Right. That's a good point. 514-790-0991. If you've got questions about the emotional needs of men and women and the differences and any struggles that maybe you have encountered because of maybe difficulty understanding each other, then we want to hear from you at 514-790-0991. You can also text us at 514-800. You're listening to Passion on CJAD 800.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. If you are an adult and want to get a handle on this once and for all, you need this seminar. Being an adult male virgin can be most stigmatizing in today's society. You feel like a failure in the eyes of the mass culture around you, alienated from your male friends who all talk about their sexual conquests, and you must hide this shameful secret lest they use it against you. And the very personal pain, anguish, and despair that cannot be described by words that haunts you every moment of your life. Enough is enough. It is time for male virgins to take charge of their sex lives. Frank gives you the rules of winning in this seminar. The Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. Make your first time the best time of her life. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys turn into men.
Dating Dilemmas tonight on Passion, our monthly feature with Frank Kermit of franktalks.com. We're talking about the emotional needs of men and women and how we understand this. Now, one of your books is Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test. I'm sure men and women test just differently. Mm-hmm. But what are these tests? Like, really, everything we say is a test? Like, how do we interpret that? Like,
Behind everything that a woman says and does is an emotional need.
Right.
Now, is everything a test? Well, I talk about this in my book. And no, sometimes when a woman says, what's the weather like outside? What she really means is, what's the weather like outside?
Right.
So it's not a test.
Yeah, I would hate to think that everything out of my mouth was interpreted as if it was a test.
Well, I interpret everything you say as a test.
Oh, great.
Keeps me on my toes.
Great.
That's why I've lasted so long, Laurie.
That's right.
No, actually what happens is it puts the guy's mind into a frame where he's filtering it. So when she says, what's the weather like outside? He has a number of different ways to interpret this. Is she asking me to protect her? So that way I will look at getting her an umbrella, saying, well, maybe you should wear your galoshes, don't scuff your shoes.
Galoshes? I haven't heard that word in a long time.
Galoshes.
Go ahead.
It's a fun sounding word. Galoshes. When she's saying, what's the weather like outside? Maybe she's just feeling like, oh, what's the weather like outside? And maybe she needs a little girl in her cater to. So that way he says, okay, tell you what, get your put your rain coat on, put on your boots. Let's go stomp in the puddles a bit. And you stomp in the puddles, and it's just a lot of fun, and it just snaps her out of her blue mood.
Okay.
So just knowing that there's a filter, that there is an emotional need somewhere in there, puts that guy's set onto radar. He's like, I'm looking for that emotional need, because it's not something that guys habitually do. It's not something they usually are not taught to do by their parents when it comes to relationships.
So
that's my job.
What other kinds of tests do women...
Here's a good test. Whenever a woman comments about other women, she's not necessarily meaning anything she's saying in the moment. She wants to see how you're going to react. When she says, my friend Debbie did this. She went to a club and she dressed in a certain way and she got up on the speaker and started to dance really sexy and this and that, and with these guys who are just looking at her, and she'll start to disparage her friend Debbie.
Okay.
This may not have even happened, but she's doing it because she wants to see how the guy's going to react. Now, if he turns around and says, oh, you know what, you're right, that Debbie, she's a bad person and she should be ashamed for what she does, here's what's being communicated. She's understanding, so I could never experiment and do something like that with you. You wouldn't be able to handle it.
Or I can't tell you about things I've done like that.
Exactly. Or, I better not tell you that it's not really Debbie who did that, it's me, okay? You can't handle that sexual, I'll start keeping secrets from you. Or what I would teach guys to say is, look, if you really feel that that is inappropriate behavior, you have to comment on the behavior. You don't make a judgment on the person.
Right.
You can say, well, I don't think that's appropriate behavior because, and then you list whatever values that you associate with it. At least she's still getting to know you.
Right.
However, here's what a lot of guys do. They'll say one thing, but actually mean the other. They'll think, well, I want her to like me, so I'll tell her, yeah, your friend Debbie's really bad for doing that. Meanwhile, what he's really hoping, wow, I'd really like to date your friend Debbie.
Right.
So if that is what's going on through his head, that's what he needs to communicate. He needs to turn around and say, why are you disparaging your friend Debbie? First of all, you're not being a very good friend to her. That is showing dominance. That's saying, look, I don't care if you're going to get angry with me being honest with you. I'm going to be honest with you anyway.
Right.
That addresses honesty, which is another emotional need of women. And telling her, listen, your friend Debbie is just liberated. She feels comfortable being sexual, and I like that.
Honesty, you bring up honesty, and I think, yes, that is, I hear that over and over and over again, and women have a really hard time with guys who keep secrets. They need transparency.
Well, women are so used to being lied to because sex for men is an emotional need, and some guys will lie just to get the sex. So women are, especially if she gets a lot of male attention, gets a lot of sexual attention, she's used to being lied to because she knows this guy doesn't really care about her. All they want is to get into her pants. And I really understood this during my experimentation when I used to dress like a pimp. Hear me out.
Those are funny pictures.
Hear me out. I would go out to clubs dressed like a pimp. Here's what would happen. The prettiest girls in the club would approach me. They would start touching me. They would say things to me like, you're so sexy. You're so sensual. I'm over 300 pounds. No woman has ever told me that I'm so sexy and sensual. But if I dressed like a pimp, I had the gold chains, I had the rings, I had the
What did they see in you?
Drama and high quality sperm, two great emotional needs.
Drama and high quality sperm. On that note, Frank, I know you do have a beautiful son, if that means you're high quality sperm. I don't know. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you again in August. Oh my God, August already. That's it for me, folks. If you want to get in touch with Frank at franktalks.com. You want to get in touch with me, passion at cjd.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Dr. Laurie Sex Talk. I want to thank Matt Ward. Thank you so much in Master Control. News is coming up next, and then Joey comes back for his comedy show. Have a wonderful rest of the evening, and remember, life is short, so do take the time to smell the flowers and indulge your passions.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, do you want the man in your life to understand you on your level? Do you want your man to be able to listen to and address all of your emotional needs? Show him how much you really want your relationship to be the best it can be. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test makes a perfect gift. The book, written by a man, for men, is endorsed by every woman that reads it. This book is a guide for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by The Eye of the Seductress, Volume 1, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. This book is designed to teach women how to seduce men into making a commitment. By learning about the emotional needs of men, a woman will learn what makes even the most notorious players, pimps, and high-value men and quality male leaders commit to one particular woman. From the desk of Frank B. Kermit, the seduction relationship expert, this book is also a great resource for men to learn how to judge the value of a woman to know if she is worthy of everything he has to offer. The Eye of the Seductress. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.